Welcome back to Birds of a Feather Talk Together. We're back from a short break and are excited to talk about the Roseate Spoonbill. For those of you that aren't familiar with our podcast, my girlfriend Amanda and I have gotten into birding in the past year and have been lucky enough to meet John Bates and Shannon Hackett, two experts in their field who also happen to be married. They're curators of birds at the Field Museum in Chicago and two of our favorite people to talk to. Each week, they offer their knowledge on a different bird, and we jump into a number of different topics related to that bird. With the recent sightings of the Roseate Spoonbill up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, we decided now would be a great time to talk about these amazing birds. What causes their bright pink color? Is it common for birds to have a receding hairline? Why are they all of a sudden being seen up north? We also answer a question from a local photographer about the great blue heron. More info on him and his question later in the episode. It's a super fun one. Shannon even wore all pink in honor of the spoonbills. Now grab your binoculars and let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. We've been off for a couple weeks, so it's nice to get everyone back together and see everyone. I'm with Amanda and John and Shannon as always. I'm doing our first morning recording, so if our vibes are a little different, maybe we're a little slower.
Or a little brighter.
Or a little brighter, a little perkier. The big rainstorm that came in this morning the robin didn't wake us up at 4 a.m.
True.
Oh, so even they take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seem not amenable to shaming in that way.
No. Yeah, so how's everybody been?
Good.
Good?
We back from vacation, a week in the Jersey Shore, which was wonderful. Lots of birds.
Nice.
Our version of the Jersey Shore, which does not involve Snooki or any of those people.
I saw you were sending me pictures. I was like, what is this going to look like? And then luckily it was all birds. Right. I was like, oh,
no Ferris wheels.
This is great.
No casinos.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just really beautiful beaches and good friends.
Nice. Do you have family out there or friends you were visiting? Or?
We're godparents to the kids of this family we met when our son was very little.
Oh, okay.
And we immediately got attracted to them because the father was pitching to the 2-year-old son, free pitching.
Oh.
And John and I looked across the parking lot and the playground at this school, the preschool they were going to, and we just immediately said, we have to know them.
Oh.
So we went up and introduced ourselves. And, our kids became very, very good friends. And now we're the godparents of the children they had after, the daughters they had after.
That's great.
So this is an annual tradition for them. The mother grew up basically around their parents had a house there until fairly recently. So they rent a house right by the beach.
Wow.
So we have the beach and there's a pool in this house. It's really pretty fantastic.
Oh.
And it's just north of Cape May, which is one of the primary migration spots on all of eastern North America. So it's kind of a legendary place for birding too.
Oh, is it a good time of the year to go there for birding?
Well, I don't think there's a bad time to go there for birding. It's going to be better as fall migration kicks in, and spring migration is also fantastic there. So it's getting there. It was really kind of fun because you're seeing the first migrants sort of start to come through.
I mean, one of the girls, her name is Grace, and she's always gone bird watching with John and done things, John has always shown her pictures of birds throughout her whole life, and now she's completely obsessed with bird memes. And she is good at finding these really interesting bird things. So she just communicates through bird memes now. It's hilarious.
With our social account, I've started finding all these bird memes too, and they're so funny. There's so many good ones out there. I'm totally into it too.
Well, Grace would approve, and she'll send you 1,000 of them in about 5 minutes.
That's great. Well, we had a really exciting sighting just this past weekend. We sent you a picture, but it was a pileated woodpecker that we saw up in Daniel Wright in Libertyville. And so we didn't even realize that they were around here at all. We were thinking it was pretty rare. We checked on eBird, and none had been seen at Daniel Wright before. So we just wanted to...
None had been seen ever?
Not
in eBird?
Not on eBird at Daniel Wright.
Yeah, interesting. So that's along the river there, the Displains, and they're probably moving into the bigger patches of forest all along that part of the river.
Okay.
So they're in places like Ryerson and some of the other woods further north.
Nice.
And but what a bird. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's the first time we've, I think, seen one in the wild, maybe, or at least with our binoculars, and it was so much bigger than we thought. We thought it was a hawk. We weren't expecting to see one, and all of a sudden saw two just really big birds fly overhead and looked at each other and couldn't figure out what it was, and then finally spotted it, and we were like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
So that was really exciting.
So
Neat.
exciting.
Yeah.
They're just, again, it's neat to see them move into this part of Illinois, and they're along the Mississippi and some of the other big river valleys. But I think they're getting more common here because I think the trees are getting older and bigger for them, and so they can find nesting sites.
Okay.
So you think of seeing a downy versus a hairy woodpecker, and the hairy seems so much bigger, but then you see a pileated woodpecker, and you're like, well, that's a big woodpecker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like in a whole different category. Like, we were blown away at how big it was.
Yeah.
So
Did you
it
take
was-
pictures
We did.
yourself?
Yeah.
A whole
Yeah.
bunch of them. I know you sent us one. But
Yeah. It was kind of tough to get a good picture, but we definitely got one or two that you
Yeah.
can clearly see it. And we think it was a female, the one that we got the picture of, because we didn't see the red on her face.
Yeah.
So, because that's how you identify between male and female, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And to identify yourself is really fun, too, to look at it and have enough confidence to know, well, I know what that is.
Yeah. We actually saw it a second time. The first time we were kind of doubting ourselves, and then we actually heard it call later, and then Amanda pulled out the from eBird and was able to play it, and we recognized it. So that was really exciting for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it sounded like a monkey or something.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's they're and again, it's one of those things where if you haven't heard it for a while, or it's like, wait a minute, what is that?
Right.
And really loud, and you can the tapping of them is much louder than the other woodpeckers too.
Yeah,
So
we heard that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want them tapping on the metal parts of your roof or something like that, displaying, because that it's really loud.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. We'd shake our whole house.
You think the robins are loud?
Oh.
I think woodpeckers make people absolutely crazy in their house, and they make them want to kill birds, even birds they love.
So are they kind of coming this way more, or is it kind of more common to see pileated woodpeckers in the Chicago suburbs, or is that a pretty...
Well, I mean, so some other places they're down south in the Palos area, and so they're in the areas with bigger habitat. And the one thing about them that I find interesting is they're pretty much non-migratory. So what you've got dispersal of individuals that are looking for territories. And so I think they probably wouldn't come into the Chicago area very much, just because I don't think there's enough good habitat for them.
Okay.
But they're definitely moving into the surrounding suburbs in the big patches of forest.
Okay. That's exciting.
Awesome.
Do you think there are more bird watchers in the Chicago area than there were 20, 30, 40 years ago? And so
Yes.
we get better sightings. And now we have eBird so that people have a place to deposit their sightings. So you know a lot more, which is why I was surprised that there were no other reported records from where you were.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, maybe it's just more people around to see them or actually looking for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Maybe.
there's definitely more people around. And the one thing I would say is that I think something like pileated woodpecker, the birders are going to find when they go out to areas, and so I think they're definitely, their populations are getting bigger over time in the immediate area.
Well, I think today we wanted to get into a bird that was very rare to see that's made headlines lately, the Roseate Spoonbill, which was first seen up in Green Bay. And then it sounds like there's been a sighting in the Chicago suburbs as well. Is that right?
Yeah, there was one flew by at Techney Basin, which is a place the North Shore birders go for. It's off of
It's not off of Willow, is it?
yeah, it's off of Willow. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And it basically did a fly around. It was one of those great stories where I heard that the guy who watched it was trying to take a picture of it when it first flew by, and his camera malfunctioned, and he was just
It's the worst.
and it made a circle and came back, and he got absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, the pictures are really nice. I don't know if you've seen them.
No.
But
No.
yeah.
Oh, wow. We'll have to check that out.
Yes. That's cool.
Yeah, and so we were reading an article about how it first got to Green Bay, and people were saying it might have been from a storm that it rolled in. Have you heard that? Or
Well, I think what's going on with Roseate Spoonbill, and then there's also been this huge number of limpkins that have shown up,
yeah.
which is another bird from the south that's associated with water and things that have shown up in the Midwest this year. It's basically vagrancy. And I think it's an interesting thing to talk about with respect to this bird because, according to the papers, it had been 178 years since one had shown up in Wisconsin.
And that one was dead.
Yeah, well,
So
or shot. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
I think they found it.
Oh, did they?
dead.
Okay, is
I
that what
think
they
that's
said?
the-
But, so what it shows is that roseate spoonbills, which are native to the coastal areas of Texas and the Gulf of Mexico over into Florida, drift north at various times, and other birds do this. I mentioned the limpkins earlier, but it's essentially this. It's a vagrant that's way out of range, and so it's really exciting because obviously this is a big pink bird with a spoonbill, and so
it's going to get noticed and bright red eyes.
I guarantee you the first person who saw that was super excited. And I know Woody Goss, the guy who watched the bird at Techne, was definitely over the moon when it flew by because all the Chicago birders were saying, well, that bird in Green Bay must have come through Illinois. But, these are vagrancy is an interesting thing in birds where it's a lot of this would be termed something called post-breeding wandering, meaning that sometimes when birds get done with their nesting season, they'll start moving around. I also think that the other thing that happens that's a little less emphasized is that you've got young birds that are a year or two old, so they're not actually breeding yet, but they're hanging around these colonies in the breeding areas, and they may just decide to look around for other places, and so they get going and just keep going.
Well, that's a long drive from the coast of the Gulf to Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But coming back to weather, I mean, weather definitely can play a role in how these things move around. Okay. And so I can't remember looking at the weather systems for the last couple of weeks before that bird, showed up in Green Bay, but it definitely can. Sometimes if those birds are already moving around, say down in Georgia or North Carolina or something, they could move inland if the weather patterns are favorable for that, and that definitely happens sometimes.
Have you guys seen them in the wild before?
Yeah, I've seen them down in Florida before.
Yeah.
So my grandparents used to.
No, not
Oh
me.
my gosh.
Yeah.
They're
That
so
is-
strange looking. And
You
so
do not
cool.
forget the first time you see a roseate spoonbill. That could be in a zoo too, because you get to see them up close. But I never even knew they existed. I don't really think much when I moved to Louisiana, and to go out and see an entire pink tree, and to know that tree is pink because it's full of giant pink birds. It's unbelievable. It's really quite a sight.
That is so cool.
And then their beaks too, right? Their bills like that wide. I mean,
Yeah,
it's such a
they don't even look
yeah.
real. They almost look like a Mr. Potato Head that kind of put you stare into the box and kind of put all the weird parts on a bird. But yeah, so they feed in water, and their beaks are narrow and flat, and have a spoon shaped at the end. And the cool thing is they're full of nerves. So if you stick your head in water, you better have a way of feeling, because you're not going to be able to see, feeling what you need to eat. So
they'll actually feel food down there and know when to
yes,
bite.
they swish their heads back and forth,
Wow.
and all the nerves really give them a highly sensitized end of their beak, and they feel little fish, little crustaceans, little invertebrates that are in the water.
Okay.
And I guess they do it with their beaks open a little bit too, so
And
gobble it up.
I wanted to bring up one of the other things about the fact that this bird was up in Green Bay, and with vagrants, one of the interesting questions is how far would you drive to see something like that if you're a bird watcher? And I know some of the North Shore birders got up to Green Bay to see that bird because it stuck around long enough.
Wow.
And that's one of the interesting things as people get into birding, is deciding to chase rarities or not.
Oh yeah,
That's awesome.
Does anybody know where it's gone since it was in Illinois? Are there sightings that it's made its way back down south?
So
or?
that's one of the interesting things about all of these kinds of things is you can't even be sure that it's necessarily the same individual.
Oh, right.
So there were some ones in southern Illinois, and so eBird, because people are posting things, you might be able to make some pretty strong inferences, but it's hard. And so one of the things about vagrancy is it's really hard to study in any kind of rigorous way unless you could literally catch the bird and put a transmitter on it and then let it go and see what it did.
I mean, this sounds horrible, but the fate of a lot of birds that get way off their paths is to die because they can't find their way back. If there's something wrong with their orientation systems, they end up, some polar opposite of where they think they're going, and they can't get back, and they have no way of finding a mate. If you go that far out of your range, you're kind of in trouble unless you can find your way back.
Yeah.
And it's a long way between Green Bay and the southern coast of the United States to go to breed or find more of what you are. So
Sure.
You have to wonder what is happening in the birds that maybe they have some kind of variant that encourages more wanderlust than other birds, and so they're something about them. They're just going to pick up and move further distances.
And climate has got to be contributing to that too, right? Wouldn't you think?
Potentially. You always wonder, and the problem is the numbers are so small at that point for Roseate spoonbill. So a good example of another short wading bird like this would be little blue heron, which has bred in the southern part of the Chicago region in the past in one or two pairs, and now they're not there. And so you start realizing that the other thing about these kinds of situations is it's probably not a male and female Roseate spoonbill that are going to find each other and actually start nesting in any of these areas. It's just these wandering individuals that are coming up right now.
But the trees of Chicago are not going to turn pink from roseate spoonbills, not anytime soon.
But it could absolutely be the vanguard of something else. So, for instance, this limpkins, this other bird that specializes in snails, kind of like roseate spoonbills, are confined to the coastal areas limpkins are mostly in southern Florida. They specialize on an apple snail there, which is this giant snail, and there's an introduced Asian apple snail that's gotten established in northern Florida and has gotten really common, and that's allowed the limpkins to start breeding much farther north than they did.
Okay.
And so their populations are clearly doing much better. They moved in and started breeding in Louisiana, and so it seems like a lot of the birds that we're getting this year could really be the result of an expanding population, where with the spoonbills, they're an interesting bird. A lot of times there's in these colonies in the South, they'll have years where they fail for various reasons because the water levels aren't suitable and they can't find enough food to feed their young. And in those situations, they may start wandering a little bit. And so it may not necessarily be about populations producing more individuals such that they're moving northward or not. I just think we'll have to see over time, and that's kind of the neat thing about these observations.
But that's the great thing that eBird is going to allow into the future, right, is that you can be at the more leading end of understanding the changing distributions of birds because of that public database that's available for anyone to both put observations in and to kind of interpret the observations that are there.
Yeah, it's like everyone's collecting data now, anybody that's looking at birds. So that's got to be super helpful.
Yeah, and those are the things that's going to help us protect birds.
Yeah.
So every little contribution makes such a big difference. And you might think, well, who cares, birding in my backyard? It's nothing. But that's actually not true. There's lots of things we know because people are looking at birds in their backyard. So really critically important that people know that their observations matter and that they matter from that perspective. And it's all of these observations that will help us understand the biology of birds and how best to protect them.
Yeah. We were texting back and forth about how wild it would be just to look out your backyard and see a roseate spoonbill.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
would. I might faint. I wouldn't believe it. Actually, I'd be like, let me check my eyes.
So
Someone putting that in the tree for me? Is that a specimen? What is that?
I've evolved over time to the point where the first thing I would do is grab the camera and try to get a photo, and that's.
I'd probably stand there and on, like, where's my phone? Where's my phone?
But then the next thing I would do is post it to one of the bird chats for the North Shore so the other birders could look at it. So, for instance, people have done that in the Evanston area when a bald eagle or another migrant flies over. They'll say, well, it's going south, and you can go out in your yard and see if you can actually find it or not.
That's really true with cranes, right? So people on the northern edges of these networks will tell you they're flying south right now. You go outside and you can hear them coming over your house.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we're excited to start hearing them. We haven't heard any yet. So I had a question about the roseate spoonbill. So I've seen them before in the wild, and they're so striking, their color, but I didn't realize that they have that they go bald. I thought that was so interesting to read about. Are there other birds that there's the California condor, I think, is bald, right? But are there other birds that start with feathers and then over time lose their hair? Or is that...
Almost all the bald birds that actually... That's a good question whether all of that's true universally. But I would say most birds are born with feathers, and then if they have bald heads as adults, they lose them over time. So vultures, for instance, are like that. And in the case of vultures, the idea is that that's an adaptation to stick your head into carcasses and things. And so having feathers would get blood in it, and it's just kind of a mess if you do it.
You can't preen your own head.
Okay.
Other birds could preen their head for them, and that does happen. But if you're going to stick your head into dead, gross things, you perhaps don't want to stick all that goo into your feathers. It's kind of gross to even talk about it. But
with roseate spoonbill, it's really interesting because the spoonbills, there are 6 species. So roseate's one of 6, and the other 5 actually all have much more. They may have some facial skin that's visible, but their heads are actually feathered. And so I'm not sure exactly why roseate spoonbills don't have a feathered head.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting.
Are they sensitive to sun? Like, can you get sunburned?
Yeah, can you get sunburned? Really good question.
I don't know what's in their skin. What color is the skin itself?
Is it like a?
It's
is
kind
it
of
like a bluish?
Yeah,
almost?
There are some different tones in there, but that's a really good question because they're nesting in very exposed areas. Yeah. They're foraging in exposed areas all the time.
Yeah, do birds get a sunburn? I never thought about that before.
This is a bird that is surprisingly understudied, despite the fact that it's so charismatic, and I'm not really sure why that is. There are a lot of basic aspects of its natural history that are kind of poorly known. So, for instance, there's not a lot known about the average lifespan of a roseate spoonbill. I mean, there's some data from banding and stuff, but not very much.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another random question about them. So when I would see them when I was younger, they were always balancing just on one leg. And I know a lot of birds do that. We've been at the Botanic Gardens noticing that even ducks do that. But we were just kind of noticing do we know why they do that?
So
it's conserving warmth.
Okay.
By tucking your leg up. You're tucking it closer to your body, closer to the feathers, closer to the warm spots.
Oh,
so
okay.
Birds have really interesting circulatory systems in their legs, and birds that live in really cold environments, sometimes they have feathers all the way down their legs to help with that, to keep their legs warm. But the blood vessels are really close together, so that the warmer blood leaving your heart warms the blood back up that's going back to your heart. So they're really close together to have that exchange of heat in their legs. There's all kinds of weird things like that, but sometimes I think maybe they just do it because they can.
It's cool.
And to build on that, when I was walking the beach in Avalon one morning, there were these big sanderling flocks, which are these little shorebirds that go to and from the beach looking for small organisms, and as the surf comes in, they were up on shore, and I was actually watching these groups where they would be kind of trying to sleep on one foot, and they would literally hop away on one foot without bringing the other one down, like they were just too much trouble to try to do it.
That's wild. Huh.
I don't think it would go very well for me if I tried to stand long periods of time
Me
or
neither.
sleep on one leg. I think
I know. I was wondering, do they like switch off? Like I would get tired on one leg.
Yeah,
I need to
I'd be
use the other
asking
one.
for my big giant pink chair that I take with me. I don't.
That's an interesting. I don't know whether anybody's ever looked into that from a scientific standpoint. Like, do they switch off legs or are they right-footed or left-footed?
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
No idea. But lots of birds do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we noticed that even like ducks, there's a lot of birds that we've just noticed randomly and are like, oh, that's such a interesting thing, and hadn't really thought about it, so I wanted to bring it up.
And the stability is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do that.
No.
Yeah.
Not for long periods of time, and some of
No.
them are like that. And it's not like they're stumbling. They're not stumbling around on
Right.
one leg like I would.
Yes. Me
They're
too.
very
Graceful
sturdy
and-
and on their foot.
Yeah.
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 All right. Well, we've got a question. Is there any other Roseate Spoonbill topics we want to cover, or should we jump into?
Do you want to cover why they're pink?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
I always have to. I love pink. Pink is my favorite color. Everybody who knows me knows that. And actually, I'm dressed in pink from head to toe today.
Shannon is in pink and has a pink bag.
I do. I love that bag. It's noticeable, and everybody knows it's mine. And nobody takes things that are pink. So if you work around a lot of men, you should have all your stuff pink, because they won't take it. So John doesn't steal my pink pens. People don't
That's true.
steal my pink glasses, and everybody knows they're mine. So it's true. He used to take all my pens, and every Christmas my stocking would be full of pens that he would buy to replace the ones that he took through the year. But not anymore, because nobody takes my pink pens, and they all know who they are. But yeah, I mean, they're pink because of the carotenoids that they get from their diets. Okay. So they eat invertebrates who have gotten that from plants, and then it gets incorporated into the bird, so that in the fat that's kind of at the boundaries of where feathers are formed, and then the pigment can get into the feathers as it is. And so that the questions about honest signaling are really there. Because there's a lot of variation in the pink, how pink these birds are, how vivid that pinkish red is in the wings, how pink the bodies are. And juveniles are not as pink as adults are. So are you a high quality individual if you're the brightest pink? That's what some of the hypotheses would say, that you're signaling your ability to get food and your superior ability perhaps to be a parent.
Okay.
And it's interesting though that Roseate Spoonbill is the only pink one of the 6 species in the group, and so it's the only one, and it's also the only one in the New World, and so somewhere along the evolutionary history of that bird, they started incorporating the carotenoids that they were getting from their diet into that plumage, and it's a neat
answers
story.
to that question can happen using genomic techniques to understand what genes are in roseate spoonbills and what mutations there might be that are different from other spoonbills. And then if you make pink repeatedly about birds, pink is not a very common color in birds. Do they all do it the same way, or do they do it different? Do they do it differently? And comparative genomics will tell us some of the answers to these questions. So I'm going to be curious. I don't know if there's a roseate
you would
spoonbill
definitely want to
genome.
study pink, wouldn't you?
I would definitely want to study pink. That's why kingfishers are so awesome, because there's lots of pink and lots of iridescent pinky things in kingfishers. Definitely.
Cool.
There's lots of really cute pink birds.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I didn't know that. When I think of pink birds, I think of like the flamingo, but I didn't know about the kingfisher too.
Yeah, kingfishers. When we're going to talk about kingfishers relatively soon, and you'll hear Yeah, kingfishers are awesome from that perspective. All these structural colors. Kingfishers have everything. Every pigment, every structural color.
Nice.
It's exciting.
Bright whites, serious blacks. Yeah.
Nice. I'm
Kingfishers.
excited for us to do a full
Yeah.
episode on them. That'll be fun.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We could do 300 episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
we
eventually,
wouldn't
I mean,
exhaust what we could know
Yeah.
about kingfishers.
I think we've got to do 10,800 episodes just to cover all the species. So.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's way more species of birds than
Well,
that,
that's true.
so.
I would agree.
Oh no, we don't have time for this again.
Yeah, we're no more discussions of. Although Heather, our student who asked us about that, thought we did a pretty decent job of talking
good.
about
Great.
it. She goes, "I never thought you would actually do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, you are a disturber."
All right, so our question, so this was actually somebody, a photographer that reached out to us on our Instagram account. His name is Dustin Wiedner, and he shared a photo on his Instagram of a great blue heron. He said, "I love herons, and being this close to one was thrilling. With this composition showing off its hilariously long neck, I wanted to learn more about it. It looks like they have 19 to 20 vertebrae in their necks, while we have 7. And I read something that's hard to picture. The 6th vertebra is elongated and articulates so the neck can fold into the S shape. I'm curious to know what that looks like. If anyone has access to a skeleton or something, hint, hint, nudge, nudge at Birds of a Feather podcast."
So that's a really neat observation.
Yeah.
So there are a couple ways you can look at that. So one would be to actually have just the skeleton. And the funny thing about skeletons, especially with articulated skeletons, the Field Museum actually has probably numerically the largest holdings of skeletons in the world, but most of them are not articulated.
Yeah.
A lot of our articulated specimens that are on display down in the bird hall, and there are actually quite a few also in an exhibit called What is an Animal, actually date back to the 1893 World's Fair, because that's how big a pain it is to actually articulate a full skeleton.
Yeah, it's super duper hard to articulate a skeleton. So when we turn dead birds into skeletons, we use bugs, we use beetles, the larvae of beetles, to chew all the flesh. And often that means what's in the bottom of the little basket that the bird sits in as it's getting eaten, that they don't stay all together, in a perfect thing. So you would have to understand how all the bones put together, and then you'd have to do very specialized things to keep that. So we can. I didn't have time to do this, but we can take a picture and we'll make sure that we post it of a skeleton. But I'm not sure what we'll see. But
What we might also do is put up a picture of a completely new way to look at things, which is that we can now CT scan stuff. And so with a CT scan, you could have everything articulated, have all the muscles there, and begin to look at it. And one of the interesting things about why birds have these long necks and extended vertebrae is obviously foraging related. But another aspect of long necks in birds is related to head bobbing and the ability to keep their visual plane focused as they're moving around. And so there's a lot of interesting things about those additional vertebrae that birds have from the perspective of what they're doing in terms of foraging and trying to catch prey.
Yeah, I mean, lots of birds kink their necks, but not all big birds kink their necks like that. So, and what dictates that?
What we talked about before, that was it cranes? They
Right.
fly with their neck straight and not
Yeah.
the herons.
So do ibis and spoonbills.
All right. Well, that was a great question.
Yeah.
So thanks, Dustin, for sending us that. And Dustin's an amazing photographer. We follow his account, so you can check him out at chicago.wildlife.photography, and make sure to check him out on Instagram.
And we'll make sure we get some pictures from our collections, and people can take a look, and we'll make sure we post a link to the site where there are all of these CT scans of birds, which you can look at and rotate to your heart's content.
Great.
That's cool.
And think about, that's the same technology that looks inside of you to figure out what's the matter with you if you're sick. The same technology that we use to look inside of a bird.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up for today. John, do you want to close it out?
Yeah, I just say always look outside your window because you never know what might be flying by.
Think pink.
Thanks everyone for listening, and thank you to Earhole Studios in Chicago for hooking us up with a place to record. They're the best. If you have a question for John, Shannon, Amanda, and I, feel free to send it to podcast.birdsofafeather@gmail.com or reach out to us on Instagram. We have some really fun episodes coming up, including episodes on the killdeer, the ring-billed gull, and the Willard sooty boo-boo. Join us next week for a brand new episode. Thanks.